Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're going to take a look at a very discreet PC which was kindly sent into the channel by Jason Woods, formerly of Love Bug Computers. Now, Love Bug Computers was Jason's little business, and this is PC number 4 in a batch of around about 300 that he's built over the years. Unfortunately, due to personal circumstances, the company is no longer in existence, and Jason had this one and said, would you like to have a look at it on the channel? And when you're done with it, would you like to then sell it on and donate a portion of it to charity? Which, yeah, we're more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to have a look at a PC. This is actually a very refreshing thing to see. A PC which isn't gone kind of balls to the wall with RGB lighting and glass side panels and quick release this and that. This is just a good, honest gaming PC at a very low cost. Now we'll go through in the video, we'll take a look at the PC first of all, go through some of the specs. We're then going to go over to PC Part Picker and price up what is roughly worth if you can buy the parts today. Some of the parts are a little bit on the older side, but if you take into account some used bargains as well, you can get a rough idea of how much this is actually worth. Also, we'll be showing you some of its gaming prowess and a few choice titles, which I've gone through and done some benchmarks and got some FPS numbers for, so you can take a look at that. But this is actually a great little gaming PC. At 1080p, maybe at 1440p if you're going to reduce some of the settings a little bit. But I think I've said enough already. Let's take a look at the PC and see what it's all about. So obviously we'll start off with the case, because the case is one of those things which is quite polarizing in the community. And there's a lot of people which see a PC case like this and they're not particularly endowed with it, not really their cup of tea. But I think if you are just looking to build a cheapish computer, why do you need an expensive case? As long as it holds all your components and doesn't rattle itself apart, then why not? And this actually was a pretty budget case. He's actually put a sticker on the front, which was supposedly specially for me. Not too sure of the resemblance, but hey, you never know. He's a boldy as well. The case itself doesn't have the latest and greatest features on there, but it's got pretty much everything you need. Obviously, power button, reset button, hard drive LEDs, etc. You also got some outputs for audio. You've also got a single USB type A, the slower ones, the USB 2, and also you've got a USB 3. So for data transfers, absolutely fine, 5 gigabit per second, stick in a USB stick and transfer over your data. Absolutely fine. Something which it has got, which you've probably noticed already, is something which we don't see every day and actually is becoming rarer and rarer, but ultimately very, very handy, especially if you've got some old games knocking around, you want to get into some retro gaming. This has got a combo DVD writer and CD writer, which, yeah, it's a quite unusual thing to see. And also when you turn the PC on for the first time, you get that magical sound of the kind of the drive caddy kind of initializing. I kind of miss that. I'm glad we don't have a hard disk drive in here, because that would have been the kind of full tilt, hearing that thing spinning up. This fortunately has a modern storage solution. And actually, despite its external looks, looking like something from the kind of mid-2000s, the internals are actually pretty modern considering. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the case. So on the side, we don't have a glass side panel, which some of you may be going, yay, brilliant. But I think a lot of people are getting used to seeing those side panels, be them perspex or glass. I think glass is preferable these days. We do have some modern touches, such as a little bit of ventilation on the side for the CPU cooler, and also to let some of the heat out from the graphics card. So that is a step in the right direction. When we look on the back, it's the usual traditional ATX layout. So power supply back at the top where it always used to be, and in my opinion actually kind of where it belongs. It's nice to have a PSU at the top, so you can use that also as an exhaust for your PC case, because this case as well doesn't have the greatest ventilation. It's not like modern cases where you've got fans and grills everywhere. It's pretty much a solid box. When it comes to the I/O, pretty much the usual stuff you'd expect to see here. So you've got plenty of USBs, USB 2s, USB 3s. You've also got an HDMI output, your LAN, audio, etc. And at the bottom there, you can see we have got a dedicated graphics card. On the back side, the usual thing, that little hump there for aiding cable management. And that is kind of it really. There's not really a lot going on here. So let's take a closer look actually inside. So taking a look inside, you can see, yes, it is a pretty compact case. This is micro ATX, so it is intentionally designed to be slightly more compact, but it's still got a standard ATX power supply. So power supply in this one is a GameMax Rampage 500 watt bronze rated, which again for most PCs is absolutely fine. Moving down from that, motherboard wise, we have got in here a Gigabyte B550M DS3H, a great little motherboard, and also has a few modern splashes such as M.2 drives and also addressable RGB lighting. So if you wanted to take it out of the case, put it into something a little bit more modern with lighting and tempered glass side panels, then you could do and have all of your lighting nicely synchronized. As we said at the top here, in this bay we've got a 5.5-inch drive, so that is a Hitachi stroke LG drive, 24-speed DVD rewriter. Moving down, don't have any drives in here, no 3.5-inch drives, no floppy drive. Bit of a shame, would have liked to have seen a floppy drive, but there you go. When it comes to cooling, actually got some pretty nice cooling. So in the front we've got a 120mm Cooler Master fan, a sickle flow. On the back there is a Arctic, I think it's a F9 or P9, nice little 92mm fan. And center stage here we've got one of the classics from Thermalright. I think that is the Thermalright Peerless Assassin 120 SE. I'm not entirely sure. We'll take a look on PC Part Picker and see if we can get an idea of what that one actually is. But again, for this is absolutely fine because the processor in here is a Ryzen 5 3600, which again is one of those kind of go-to processors for budget gaming builds. Still modern enough to run Windows 11 if you want to, and still has a pretty decent amount of horsepower for most modern games, especially being that most games these days are pretty much GPU dependent. And when it comes to the GPU in this one, this is an MSI Classic. This is the Radeon RX 5500XT, the 4GB version, which I know some of you are going to be going, oh my god, 4GB, that cannot be used in 2025, but that's where you're wrong. For 1080p gaming, and even sometimes 1440p depending on the game, this is going to be absolutely fine as long as you temper your expectations, lower settings, lower graphical fidelity. You're still going to get a lot of fun out of this, and especially with this sort of PC, realistically, are you looking at playing kind of 4K Ultra? No, clearly you're not. So this is absolutely fine and also keeps prices down. You can pick up these on the used market for anywhere between the kind of £60 to £100 mark, and they still do provide a lot of enjoyment. When it comes to storage, we've got something actually pretty modern here. So PCI Express Gen 3x4 drive. This is a Crucial P3 and it's got a 1TB model installed. So again, plenty of storage, even if you're loading up with, I don't know, 6-10 games, you should be absolutely fine and still have a little bit of breathing room for some of your media files. What does actually set this apart from a lot of the more budget orientated PCs on the market is the fact this actually has 32GB of DDR4 RAM. So this is Corsair Vengeance DDR4 3200 CL16, I believe it is, maybe CL18. Do need to have a close look at that, but realistically, at this kind of price point, it doesn't matter. 32 gigs is very welcome. We are starting to see where Windows is starting to get a little bit bloated, and apps and programs and obviously browsers are using more and more memory. So going from 16 gigs to 32 gigs over the 4 sticks here, I think is actually a pretty sensible solution and gives it a little bit more longevity. Now in terms of cable management, you can't really be too harsh on this. It is a micro ATX case and there's quite a lot of cabling in here, but I think it's actually done a very good job. It all looks pretty neat and tidy. Nothing is obstructing any fans, and also I would say the fans have been an absolute excellent choice. Due to the Thermalright cooler and also being an Arctic fan and a decent quality Cooler Master one at the front, with the fan profile set up in the Gigabyte control center, this thing's whisper quiet, it really is. Although when you get gaming, it does get a little bit noisier thanks to the GPU, which these GPUs, the 5500XTs, were really known for pushing the hotspot temperatures. The GPU itself should be somewhere between the 60 and 70 degrees mark, whereas the hotspots can get anywhere between 70 and 90 degrees Celsius, potentially even more. They are rated up to, I think it's 110 is their maximum, which is a little bit on the scary side. But due to the extra fan at the front here, pulling a little bit of air over the front, it does seem to keep those temps under control, and even under extended gaming loads, it's been absolutely fine. So that's it for the PC. Let's take a look at PC Part Picker now and see what this could actually cost you in 2025. So here we are on PC Part Picker. This is the UK version, so American prices may differ slightly, but should be in a similar kind of ballpark. So at the moment, with what we've got set up here, around about £425, give or take. Now, there's some things which I couldn't get exact like for like, so I've gone with very similar approximations. So starting off with the processor, now the Ryzen 5 3600 in 2025, you probably wouldn't want to buy that brand new for £65. You'd probably want to go for like a 5600, which isn't going to be tremendously more expensive. And if you don't mind shopping on places such as AliExpress, you could get yourself a 5600 or 5700 X3D for a relatively modest sum. So processor wise, this is absolutely fine, no problems at all. When it comes to the cooler, so I was a little bit wrong. So this is actually the Assassin King SE. This at the moment is retailing for £17 here in the UK, and yeah, is a pretty nice looking cooler, does the job, keeps temps really nice and low. You've also got the Gigabyte B550M DS3H micro ATX board. These at the moment are £72 give or take here in the UK, which I think is actually fine for a B550. Also, again, with anything, you do have to be looking a little bit at the future. Potentially a B650M might have been a better choice, but then you've got the associated costs of more expensive DDR5 RAM, also different processor, etc, etc. So costs can spiral out of control very quickly, but I think for this particular setup, that is an excellent choice. You could have gone with a B450 motherboard to save a few pounds, but you wouldn't save a great deal, and of course you'd lose out on things such as PCI Express and also potentially your M.2 drives. Now when it comes to the RAM, I've got the price in here as this is a brand new kit, Corsair Vengeance LPX 4x8 at £93. Now I don't think anybody realistically is going to pay that in 2025. You're more likely to be heading around on the used market where you can pick up a 16 gig kit for somewhere between £20 and £25. So you could argue this is about £50 worth, so almost half the price of what it would be new. So if you are searching around for bargains, I certainly suggest that is well worth doing, especially being that RAM generally comes with a lifetime warranty, which often is transferable as well. So I think you could potentially save a bit of money there. But again, we're trying to get this as close to new prices as possible wherever we can. When it comes to the drive, so I've gone for the Crucial P3 Plus 1TB. This isn't a Plus version, but I couldn't find one listed. Realistically, for a 1TB M.2 drive at the time of recording, which is September 2025, you should be looking somewhere between £40 and £50. As always, there are offers that crop up. There has been one recently, which was posted on our Discord, for some Western Digital blue drives, 1TB. That is the SN850. I believe 580 it was, sorry, my mistake. And those were £35 from Overclockers, I think it was, which was an absolutely phenomenal deal. So I have stocked up on those, but realistically, if you're buying drives at the moment, you're looking at £40 to £50 for 1TB NVMe, whether it's PCI Express Gen 3 or 4. Lots to choose from, lots of different brands. Ideally, obviously go for a known brand or well-known brand, such as your Crucials, your Samsungs, etc. But that choice ultimately is down to you. And when it comes to the graphics card, it was hard finding this as a new price because it is basically out of commission now. So looking around on eBay, etc., somewhere between £60 to £100 for one of these in good condition. I've put in as being 60, being that is the lowest we can get it for at this time. So I think £60 for that is actually pretty fair. Yes, it's only a 4 gig card, so it is going to have a limited lifespan. So it might be worth spending a little bit extra, maybe knocking the price up a little bit and getting an 8 gig version. But again, ultimately it depends what is available. And being that this PC came with the 4 gig one, I had to try and do like for like. So that's where we get our price from. Case-wise, I couldn't find anything which was exactly the same. So I come up with this one from Colink, which isn't entirely, well, you can get the general idea. It's very similar. It's got the same sort of look and feel to it. This is an ATX one, not a micro ATX. But in terms of its kind of its structure and its layout, it's very similar indeed. And at the moment, this one from Overclockers is £29.99. You can pick them up a little bit cheaper now. I've seen them sort of 20 to 25, but £30 is about right for a PC case, I think, of the kind of lower end. As always, if you want to spend a little bit more money, £40, £50 gets you something a lot more modern and with a lot more features and potentially with a bunch of RGB fans. So I would probably steer clear of this unless you actually have a reason to have a discreet looking PC, maybe for an office setup or just to hide behind a cabinet somewhere, in which case this is going to be absolutely fine. Power supply wise, we've got the GameMax Rampage, tried and tested. These things, a lot of people turn their noses up at GameMax power supplies. The Rampage range have always been really good, although they have come to the point where they've started to include the 3.5 and 5 volt wattages actually into the kind of rolled up things. So this is likely to be more closer to a 450 or maybe 470 watt power supply. Again, at this kind of level, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. 500 watts is still way more than this PC actually needs, but we'll give you the option to upgrade a little bit later on down the line should you wish to. So that gives us a price of £425.33, again, at the time of recording. I'll put the link for this in the video description and also some of the PC parts as well. So if you want to kind of design your own PC around this sort of spec, then feel free to do so and let us know in the comments what sort of pricing you can get, what can you actually narrow it down to. I think around about £400 is about the bare minimum you can do if you are going with a dedicated GPU. Obviously, if you go with an APU, you can knock probably a good £100 off this, which again, isn't going to be great for gaming, but you can play some games. But this, I think, is going to be pretty much the best options at this kind of price point. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. So there are some ideas of pricing of what this bad boy would actually cost you if you were to build one in 2025. But I think now we really should take a look at some gaming and some benchmarks. So let's start off first of all with 3D Mark Time Spy, and you'll see the scores up on the screen there. And being that this is a slightly older PC, we've also got 3D Mark Firestrike. And just for good measure, we've also got 3D Mark's SSD test. Also, we've got some Unigine Heaven. So with those out of the way, we can move on to some actual real gaming, and these are played by me and recorded on our desktop PC capture. So let's take a look first of all at CS2. Now CS2 is running here at 1080p, as are all the games in this little roundup. This is running at the high settings, so just literally switch to the high preset. And with this, we're getting somewhere in the region of 150 to 170 FPS, which is more than playable and almost borderline competitive. Obviously, if you wanted to make it more competitive, you can put it down to medium or low. Most competitive players will actually knock it right down to get the most frames per second. I think for most people, casual gaming, high settings gives you just enough eye candy to make it pretty to look at, but also competitive to play. Next up, a slightly older game, but still one which can be a little bit taxing on some systems. So this is Far Cry New Dawn. This is running at 1080p with the Ultra settings. I think Far Cry games do really need the graphical fidelity, so we've gone for Ultra. Again, you could knock it down to high and you probably wouldn't notice the difference, but with this we're getting somewhere in the region of about 100 FPS, which for this type of game is absolutely fine. It's not necessarily a competitive shooter, but there are elements of that in there. I think for this, visually, 100 FPS, Ultra settings, I think this is absolutely fine. And next, obviously, for this kind of esports type PC, an esports game makes a lot of sense. So this is Rocket League running on Steam, and this is at the highest possible settings with everything turned on except motion blur. And with this, we're easily getting 250 FPS in a lot of instances. It actually felt really nice and smooth and very responsive. It was a pretty enjoyable experience overall. Next, trying to crank up the graphical fidelity a little bit. So we've got Wreckfest. This is the original version, not Wreckfest 2. So this is Wreckfest 1080p at the high preset. And with this, as always, you do get those stutters at the beginning, which is a very common thing to see. Although you do find the longer you play a lot of these games, the stuttering does tend to go as the shader cache builds up, I'm assuming. But this is good for anywhere between 60 and 120 FPS on average. Again, with this type of game, it depends what actual map or circuit you're on. That does influence the FPS quite dramatically, depending where you are, the kinds of foliage and gravel, sand, etc, etc, and also how many vehicles are actually in the race. But between 60 and 120 FPS for Wreckfest, high settings, I think is absolutely fine. If you want more FPS, just knock it down to medium and you'll have a much better time. Next up, we've got Dead Island 2. Now this is actually running at the medium preset, which also does incorporate FSR quality settings. And this is pretty much consistent at 100 FPS. There's a lot going on in this game, and also depending where you are, much like with, well, any game really, depending on your surroundings, your FPS can fluctuate. So it is sometimes nice to have a higher powered GPU, just so that you don't get bogged down in some areas. But I think with this, around about 100 FPS pretty much consistently is absolutely fine and more than playable. Again, this isn't a competitive shooter by any means, this is just a fun shoot 'em up, so anything over 60 FPS is absolutely fine. And last of all, being that this is pretty much the king of the esports titles, we've gone for Fortnite, and we're running Fortnite 1080p at the medium preset, although it did actually try to run at the high preset, which is what it actually auto set as. I knocked it down to medium just to try and get a little bit of a higher frames per second. It still looks really nice, and we're averaging somewhere in the region of about 120 FPS, which again for Fortnite is absolutely fine and is moderately competitive. As always, like I've said repeatedly, I'm sounding like a scratch record here, You can use Fortnite's kind of esports mode, or just knock it down to low settings, but set your draw distance to epic, and you should have a pretty good time. But for me, this was absolutely fine. I enjoyed it a lot, and yeah, I was competitive as usual, which for my age is actually quite a thing. But yeah, Fortnite runs absolutely fine on this little PC. So there we are, we've come to pretty much the end of the video. At this point, it's very customary to ask you to leave your comments in the comment section. I would say be kind. Obviously, we are in a world now where it's all about looks and lighting, but this I think actually does show what you can do without having to spend a lot of money. Now obviously you can make slight changes to this to tweak it to your own personal circumstances, your own budget, or your own aesthetics. For me, I think this is absolutely fine. Again, depending where it is, if it's going to be in an office or tucked away behind something, you don't need a flashy case, and you can save a considerable amount of budget, and you can put that towards better or more optimal things, such as maybe the next level processor, an extra 16 gigs of RAM to take it up to 32, which I think for modern Windows use is getting to be the kind of, not the minimum, but the kind of the sweet spot. 32 gigs of RAM works really well. The 1TB NVMe I think was a great inclusion. The graphics card, again, kind of, there's debate on that. 4 gigs is a little bit on the low side, but again, depending on what sort of games you are personally playing and what sort of graphical settings you actually want to play those games at, that is where it comes down to it. Now, of course, you can go over to other channels such as Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed, etc., just to name a few, where the whole 16 gig minimum thing is very much in vogue. But I think actually, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you just want to play games, have a bit of fun. Maybe if you're coming from a console and you want to get into PC gaming and you're not really sure if you want to spend £1,000 on your desktop PC, maybe you've got £300–400, this is the kind of thing that you should be looking to buy, in my personal opinion. But as with anything, those are my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. Again, massive shout out to Jason Woods. Very kind of you to send us over this PC for us to take a look at, and also for us to then sell it and then donate 50% or more to charity. Potentially, I've got an idea of what we might do with that, but we'll let you know more about that as time goes on. Let me know, what would you think I should do? Should I just leave this as it is in its kind of original form factor? Or should I try and get a relatively budget micro ATX case with a little bit of RGB bling? I think potentially that might draw more viewers in when it comes to actually selling it. But in terms of people who actually know what they want, I think this is actually pretty decent. And also, I do love the fact that it's still got a DVD-ROM drive in there, which actually could be really handy if you just want to play some older games which are still disc-based, or maybe you just want to pop in a DVD. Who's still got DVDs knocking around? Let me know in the comments section. Anyway, I think that's going to pretty much wrap this video up. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, smash that like button. If you want to see more content like this on the channel, let us know in that comment section. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.